Hello, and I'd like to welcome you to today's presentation, and we thank you for joining us from wherever in the world you are. We're coming to you from all over the world today. Our presenters are in California, Nigeria, the UK, France, Germany. I think I have all the countries from our presenters, and Omdena, of course, is all over the world. I'm Laura Clark-Murray, and I'm head of operations and partnerships with Omdena, and I'll be moderating today. And we really do thank you for joining us. Today's presentation is one in a series of demo days that we've been doing to give our AI and data science teams a chance to share some of the excellent work that they've been doing and the results of the numerous projects that we have done. And today we're talking about the global transition to clean energy and the role that AI plays in that transition. We'll be talking about two of the projects that Omdena has done regarding the energy transition. But first, I'd like to explain a little bit about the logistics of today's session. After this brief intro, our presenters from the Omdena technical teams will be sharing the work on two projects related to the energy transition. And then this will be followed by a 10-minute Q&A session. So please post your questions in the chat of this Zoom session during the presentations, and we will pose as many as we possibly can to our presenters during that Q&A session. I do want to let you know that this session is being recorded and it will be shared on omdena.com. So first, a few words about Omdena. Omdena is an innovation platform where experienced AI engineers and domain experts collaborate to build solutions to real-world problems. For each 8-week project that we do, excuse me, we gather a diverse team from around the globe to focus on creating solutions that have social impact. Our customers include the World Resources Institute, the UN Refugee Agency, the Botner Foundation, as well as numerous NGOs and corporations. And since we launched a year ago, we've executed on 21 projects with more than 1,200 collaborators from 82 countries. And we have 2 additional projects underway. Today, we're going to be talking about the work that Omdena has done in the area of energy. And as we all know, the world is in the midst of a massive energy transition. The goal established by the UN is to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all by 2030. We'll be sharing 2 Omdena projects today, but first we're going to focus on the work that was done with our partner, Renewable Africa. One moment, I've lost my slides. Apologies. There we go. So first we'll focus on our work that was done with our partner Renewable Africa 365, an NGO on a mission to end energy poverty in Nigeria. We're very grateful to Ademola Eric Adewumi and his team at RA365 for the opportunity to work with them and deliver tools that further their very important mission. So before handing off to our Omdena presenter to talk about this work, I'd like to introduce Mr. Joseph Itopa. He's a machine learning engineer who's going to share some comments on behalf of RA365 regarding the impact of this work. So I'm going to stop my screen share and hand it off to you, Joseph.
Yeah, hello everyone. Laura, thank you for the opportunity, and thanks to the Omdena community. I'm Joseph Itopa from Nigeria, representing RA365. I will share my screen now. Okay. Accelerating the clean energy transition in Nigeria. As we all know, Nigeria is one of the countries in the world facing a lot of energy challenges. Um, our objective at RA365 is very clear. We want to provide electricity to the less privileged, those who are not financially buoyant, be it organization or individuals or communities. So in order to do this, we want to build a system, develop a system that can help us handle this. So AI engineers from Omdena have helped us with technologies in building a tool that has been able to identify locations, about 1,000 locations in Nigeria where we have to offer these solutions or the renewable energy devices that we have to give to remote locations that have no access to electricity. And also we want to make sure that we have, we use geofencing, which is also offered through the AI engineers at Omdena, to be able to make sure that the devices we offer to these people are located at the right place and they are not moved around. And we're working towards providing each location with 2,000 kilowatts of electricity. This is our engineers, our founder, talking to some engineers from Transwatt, our partner company, who are developing the hardware while we are developing the software that will sit on top of the API built by Omdena AI engineers. Here they were talking about the specifications of the inverters and the rest. So we have really taken a step in trying to implement this. And currently we are talking with the Lagos State government in order to facilitate this. And they have welcomed the idea. As you can see, this is Lagos State in Nigeria. So we want to say a big thank you to Omdena for helping us. They have really been of help to us, and to the entire Omdena community. I want to say a big thank you. You will not know that in order to get this job done, it's not all about providing the solutions to these people. We want to make sure that the solutions get to the right people at the right places, and Omdena has really helped us to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Joseph. We really appreciate that. And now I want to hand off to our first presenter who will talk about this project in depth. Before I do, I just want to remind you to please post your questions in the chat during the presentation. And so now I'd like to turn things over to a lead machine learning engineer for Omdena, Simon McKenzie. So Simon is an experienced AI engineer and data scientist, and he brings decades of experience in strategic development and management consulting as well. And now over to you, Simon. Okay, one moment, we need to.
Hi. Okay, are we clear? Can you see? Excellent, hopefully. Okay, I'm going to give some background to the project first and the objectives that we had for the project. And then I'm going to focus on 4 specific areas. The project covered a very wide range of work streams, but I'm going to focus on 4, which is how did we find where the population are in Nigeria, who are the ones without electricity, where do they live in relation to existing grid power lines, how do we cluster them together, and then finally I'm going to go through some of the outputs. So to start with the background, basically Nigeria has a huge problem with lack of access to electricity. There's around half of Nigerians have no access to electricity at all. And that makes it really hard, not just in terms of quality of life, but also it has a knock-on effect to the economy, to healthcare. Really hard to operate a health centre without electricity. You have to hand pump water rather than have an electric pump. It's really hard, especially hard for women. You know, even things like fridges, mobile phones, none of these things can exist, obviously, without electricity. And with that size of population, 200 million people, the obvious answer is power stations. But they already have a lot of power stations, and unfortunately, they don't always work. It's very unlikely they're ever going to cover the rural communities. And there's an awful lot of people that are living in rural communities. So an alternative to the national grid is to go for some kind of local solution, which can really add a lot of value to local communities. And that local engagement requires a much lower investment, so it's relatively easy to get off the ground, can be done quickly. Reduce the fact that the local community is involved means there is less theft, less vandalism, less corruption, and the whole decentralization basically spreads the risk and makes it much more practical. So to come on to the actual data project, our objectives then are to first of all find the communities where these solar panels will add most value. And that means looking for people that are living in a fairly close area, so 4,000 people living within, say, 500 meters rather than 5 kilometers, so you don't have to spend a lot of money on cabling, and it's not very spread out. Obviously, that they don't have electricity already. They live more than 15 kilometers from the grid, and ideally, if there's some schools, medical centres, water points, that all adds additional value because those institutions clearly can make very good use of the electricity and use some of the capacity. Now, all of these are reasonable objectives, but there's still quite a lot of ambiguity. So when we say, for example, without electricity, that's quite a vague term. It could be, and it is the case, that in some towns in Nigeria, all the homes are linked to the grid, but there was a part in the local transformer that broke 3 years ago and nobody fixed it. So they've kind of got electricity, or they're wired up, but they don't actually have electricity. In other places, it's very unreliable. It only works 2 hours a day, some days not at all. And that might be fine for a light bulb, but if you've got a fridge where you want to keep your food fresh, it's not much good if it works for 2 hours and then goes off for 2 hours. And especially if that's in a fairly random way. I mean, you could be these days, you could have coronavirus and need a ventilator. It's not much good if it's not available 24/7. It needs to be 24/7. A lot of people also have electricity, but it's in their village, but it's not actually wired up to their home. Or it may be only in institutions, in a health centre or a school. So when we look at estimates of who's got electricity in Nigeria and who hasn't, there's a big question over what that really means, with electricity, without electricity. But bearing that in mind, we'll move on to the first challenge, which is population. So we need to find out, where are the 200 million people? And again, there's no ground truth here. So I'm not sure how do you even know there are 200 million people in Nigeria? We kind of know that from a number of different sources, but there's no real ground truth. And certainly at a local level, it's very hard to know in a specific town what the actual population is. There's a census, but the census covers a very wide area. So each census area is 200 square kilometers. So that's not good enough for us. We need to find clusters of 4,000 people in a very small area and not spread over 200 square kilometers. We also don't know if the census is reliable because it's run by local officials, and often budgets and money is driven by census numbers. So there's lots of reasons why people might want to inflate those numbers. And you know, all of that would mean that the data might not be useful. And so we need a way of checking it and to find out at a local level what the population is. So one way to validate this is to use Google Earth. Google Earth is a fantastic tool for all sorts of things, because you can zoom in and you can see a high resolution satellite image. You can see this town here. You know that in the black area there's going to be, and the green area, there's going to be quite a lot of people because you can see the buildings. The blue area and the red area, you'll have fewer people. We can also use Google Earth in other ways. So to see whether people have street lighting, you can zoom into a town, see if they have street lighting. If they don't have street lighting, probably they don't have electricity. So population. So given that we now have a way of validating it, we need a population model. There's lots of public data sets, and the typical way they do this is they take the census and they use something called asymmetric mapping, which spreads it out based on land usage. So if it's a lake, then nobody lives there. If it's a building, then there's probably some local survey data that gives you an idea of how many people per building in that area. Then there's more sophisticated models that remove that sort of arbitrary part of land usage and use places where they know the population. And this looks really good, but actually these models often seem to fail. So looking at this particular town, you know, we tended to find there's some places the red area might have loads of people living in it and the black area didn't, which just doesn't make sense in practice. So we could take a step back and basically produce our own model, but we don't have access to high-res images or a multi-million-pound budget. So better if we can find one that works. Unfortunately, there was one produced which seemed to be very, very reasonable, looking at which was validated on lots of towns. And it was done by the Vaccination Tracking Service for a polio study. And they used high-resolution satellites to identify the settlements, and then had local surveys to find ground truth on local populations, and then used that to create a model that allowed accurate population at a local level. And this has been tested through the polio vaccination scheme, because they know when they go to a health centre that they know how accurate the model is, because they can see how many people are coming for the vaccines, and they don't have to waste vaccines. So now we have this model. We need to apply it to the whole country. Now you can see on this map, you can see it looks reasonably realistic. All of the major towns in the southwest of the country, you can see have roughly the right level of population. But this is not typical of the country. If we look at the whole country, we actually see that the population is very, very scattered. This has still got the red, amber, green, yellow shading, and each of those colours contains 25% of the population. But you can see very little red there. It all seems to be gone into the background, and lots of yellow. That's the bottom quartile of the population in terms of population density, and it's basically spread out across the country. And in fact, looking at other studies, we see of the 200 million population, there are 8 million in Lagos and 46 million in the top 24 cities. But basically 150 million people live in the rest of the country outside those cities. So it's a very ruralized and spread out economy, population. So we've got population. Now let's look at electricity. And thanks to the wonders of NASA, we have a satellite image that is produced every night across the whole world, down to a resolution of 750 meters. That gives you a very good idea as to who has electricity, because you can see the lighting. And you can see here a big contrast between Europe, India, and Africa. Partly that's because there's a lot more desert areas in Africa than there is elsewhere, but also it's because there's a lot of places without electricity. And looking at Nigeria, which is a little square in the map, you can see the south coast of Nigeria seems to have quite a lot of electricity. The northern part of the country, much less. Now we can zoom in on this map. You can use these satellite images to go to a very detailed level, and we can now add these to our map. So those are the purple areas on the map, and you can see here that again, bottom left-hand corner is Lagos, and then this is the major urbanizations around Lagos. You can see most of those do actually have electricity. There's quite a few anomalies even on the NASA data. I mean, one month there was a whole area of the country which was lit up very brightly when it isn't the rest of the time, and it was too large for a refugee camp or an army or whatever, and still a mystery. I think it sort of underlines that you really have to check your data here and make sure that what you're looking at makes sense, and not just take one night as your view on electricity, but to take some kind of average over a large number of nights, and obviously a large number of seasons as well. So now we have population, we have electricity. The next thing is the grid. So you may think that power companies would know where their power lines are, but they actually don't. And so there was a project that mapped out the grid using machine learning, uses an exception model with transfer learning from ImageNet, applies that to satellite images to find towers, and then there's a large team of people that then prioritized their manual work of going through and linking those towers up to get a map of the grid. So we've got a very good machine learning driven map of the grid. And you'll note here on this project we're reusing a lot of stuff from other projects rather than reinventing the wheel, because there's some very well funded and very strong projects existing that we can use, that we can leverage to provide a solution to our problem. So here you can see the bottom of the country. Again, you can see the purple area. So it's all very well lit up down there. You can see the grid covers the whole of the country. We can now zoom in, and we can see this is the Lagos area again. So you can see even more of that area is either covered by, already has electricity, or is covered by the grid. So indicates, you know, a lot of our work is probably going to be outside that area. So the next thing is, how do we actually cluster the population? So we've got people, electricity, and a number of towns, but there's an awful lot of towns. So this is just north of Kano, and you can see there's hundreds of towns. And we need to find out which ones have 4,000 people. So we use a clustering technique called dbScan, which is very, very simple. Basically, you start with all these dots, and if you were to do it for, say, clusters of 4 within a 500-meter radius, you just draw a circle around each dot, and all the ones with 4 in then become part of a cluster, and then you merge those clusters together, and you end up with some actually pretty reasonable clusters. And the beauty of this is very easy to understand in terms of only 2 parameters, the radius of the cluster and the size, and you don't need to say how many clusters, and it works for any shape, extends along a road, and actually works really well in practice. So pulling that all together, if we look at the big picture, the clusters have been marked in green. So that's clusters of 4,000 people in 500 meters. That gives you the big picture impression. You can see there's a lot in the north around Kano, but also nationally, basically everywhere, there are some green dots. And we can drill in on this. So if we drill down, here is a cluster, here is probably a dozen clusters on this image. And some of them have got a population of anything between 4,000 and 15,000 people. All of those towns are suitable potentially for our off-grid solar navigation. So we've got about 1,000 of those probably nationally. And in summary, so we started out, we were looking for the communities where solar panels would add the most value, 4,000 people, 500-meter radius, without electricity. And we've come up with basically a map that shows all the target settlements, which you can zoom in on, so you can see all the ones that are in that local area, and then a priority list, which is basically a spreadsheet which has got all of the additional data that we collected on schools, healthcare, and additional machine learning models, which give scores for things like solar efficiency and the likelihood of there being water points, which could be something that adds value. So the next steps with this is to basically go to those some of those towns, the top towns on the list, and survey them to see if they are suitable for the electricity, the off-grid solar panels. And then as you gain a better understanding of costs and financing and other issues, you can then basically resort that list and change your priorities. But it's available in a detailed level across the whole country. So thanks very much for listening. I'll be happy to answer questions at the end of the session.
Thank you so much, Simon. And then if you end your screen share, that would be great. And we'll just get back into this. Okay, so thank you so much. And yes, please everyone ask your questions in the in the chat. So now we'll turn our attention to the next project. The World Energy Council is the world's leading member-based global energy network, and they commissioned Omdena to explore the use of sentiment analysis to understand how people around the world perceive this energy transition and their role in it. Martin Young is the Senior Director of Insights at the World Energy Council. Unfortunately, could not join us today, and he asked me if I would please read his thoughts, share a statement that he gave me about this project. So that's what I will do. So this is from Martin. The digital revolution is affecting the energy sector and offering new opportunities to improve economies and societal well-being. Energy systems are moving from being one direction of producers to passive consumers to being multi-directional with more engaged and proactive communities. Understanding how these communities feel about their energy is becoming more important, but can be challenging to discover. The Council has been interested in how public sentiment on energy issues might be tracked, or if this were even possible. That is where this project came in. The team at Omdena explored the broad brief and have proved that the conceptual idea is possible. At the World Energy Council, we now need to consider how we might develop this idea further. I hope you enjoy the demo day and get inspired to see we can work together for more inclusive, economic, and sustainable energy futures for all. So thank you to Martin for that, and for the partnership with the World Energy Council on this really fascinating project. So now I'd like to turn things over to the Omdena team members who will present the work. We'll have Amardeep Singh. He's a machine learning engineer with a chemical engineering background, and Julia Wabant is a data scientist with Lextenso, specializing in natural language processing.
Right.
All right, over to you.
Yes, just a second. Okay, I hope that's visible to everybody, and there's good feedback as well.
Yes.
So first of all, welcome to the summarized results that we conducted as part of this project. The main objective, of course, was to look into the use of natural language processing to better understand what kind of sentiments people are having when they discuss about important topics such as green energy, sustainability, energy pricing, and all the other secondary topics that fall into that particular umbrella. We understand that there's a huge problem when it comes to interpreting what exactly goes within the minds of people when they have these discussions. There are multiple data sources and lots of incomplete information, which has a great amount of bias, and of course, a lot of cross-cultural differences caused by differences in languages, socioeconomic differences, and whatnot. And it becomes difficult to pool all these ideas into a single resource to better understand what exactly is it that people are thinking about when they have such discussions. So the main purpose and motivation, of course, we understand that being in the 21st century, data has become the new oil, or perhaps the new resource that we can tap into to connect the information that people are distributing when they have discussions back into the context for making better decisions for energy use and energy transition. The problem scope looked into many different sources, including social media websites, discussion forums, news article websites, as well as other online sources for different countries. And we understand that the information that we collected so far would play a great role in shaping the understanding for not just policymakers and economists, but even those who work in governments, in the sectors for environment and consumers and people as a whole. The goal, in short, was to create a verifiable list of resources which could be used for generating good content based on the kind of conversations and keywords and phrases we wanted, breaking down, analyzing them, and cleaning them up so that they could be used for analysis, and connecting these with useful visualizations which would help people better understand what exactly is it that goes on when they have such discussions. We've achieved quite a lot. We were able to generate a lot of good clean data sets from multiple media sources, create interpretable sentiment analysis visualizations, which again help us better understand what exactly and with what negativity or positivity people talk about such ideas, as well as extremely accurate AI models to predict and classify texts and other information online. To summarize the exact pipeline steps, we collected a verified list of resources, combined these lists and resources with websites and other sources, automated a data cleaning and data scraping methodology to pool all these into a single resource, and of course, applying sentiment analysis and other algorithms on those to classify and predict the sentiments behind them. This is again just a small breakdown of how the sentiment analysis was done from a simple resource for tweets. You could see that there are steps involved in parsing the data, pre-processing it, and applying different machine learning algorithms on those as well. And of course, generating important features, which we will be looking on as we move on to the presentation. And again, this is just a small summarization of different tasks that different team members on the project were looking into. Some were involved in data collection, some were involved in converting the data to more usable forms by using data dictionaries, which we'll go on to as we move on. And of course, coming up with better AI models to improve this prediction model. So let's move into a typical example of a data machine learning model for topic modeling. This is a simple example of a collection of documents that are being subjected to certain analyses using a typical black box model and the kind of features that are being generated from it. So just as a case example, on the top left, you could see a couple of different news sources and websites and articles which we consulted to extract meaningful information from. These were basically automated to be grouped into separate text documents. And after applying the different algorithms from LDA, we were able to generate a good list of features from these, which were then basically grouped into using typical models for machine learning and clustering as well. At the top bottom, you can see one of the few results we achieved based on the proximity of different words being used, as well as the kind of sentiment that was generated from them. And of course, as we moved on, we enhanced this process as well to make this whole classification system more refined. And now I pass it on to Julia to touch upon sentiment analysis.
Thank you, Amardeep. So yeah, sentiment analysis is a text analysis method that can detect polarity. So basically, whether an opinion is positive or negative, and this polarity can be very precise. In this case, we talk about fine-grained sentiment analysis, and it can also be aspect-based. In this case, the analysis permits to identify sentiment associated with each aspect, so it requires aspect categories and corresponding aspect terms. And by emotions, that we see on the last point, we mean those emotions that are universally known, such as anger, fear, or joy, and there are quite exhaustive dictionaries of emotion, especially the NRC, which Amardeep will talk about. I will pass slide to you, Amardeep.
Sorry, yeah, I'm unmuted now. Okay, am I audible to everybody? Hello?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, you
sorry.
are.
Okay, sorry for that. Yes. So moving on, the whole system of sentiment analysis can be broken down into a system of both machine learning approaches and lexicon-based approaches, which we looked into in both ways to see exactly what kind of models could be the best fit for classifying the text we have. And just as an example, this is one of the few results we generated from data that was scraped from Reddit, which is a extremely popular discussion board where people discuss about ideas for anything and everything related to global politics and even, you could say, different sorts of environmental issues. This is, again, just a collection of different keywords and phrases that we were able to generate based on these models which we applied. And of course, we went on to do this sort of analysis a more directive way by looking into frequency plots and also going with other sources from Facebook, YouTube, as well as other sources from online websites. To refine the understanding of the sentiment that goes into the kind of discussions people have, we had again moved into the different kinds of dictionaries that tools like Python and RStudio allow us to use. And you could see here that we have dictionaries from AFIN and Bing, which do provide us some insights into what kind of sentiments people have when they make these discussions. But of course, we could refine this a little bit more by using NRC, which is far more advanced in detecting different kinds of emotions that people express when they type out or when they output certain kinds of texts online. This is just another example of the kind of sentiments and emotions people feel when they talk about energy transition tweets. And of course, we expanded this whole idea about classification systems to other sources. This is again another list of sentiment frequency plots that were generated from a discussion board on Reddit. I believe this was for a topic for energy transition from a subreddit from the US section. And I pass it back to Julia once again.
Yeah. So as Amardeep said, a preliminary step of every data science and machine learning implies exploring data and creating features that will be used by models and many more. And as part of our project, we made sure to create as much visualization as possible, especially workflows type graphics like this. So here the inputs are bag of words that you can see as kind of multi-sets of words in tweets. And the more wider co-occurring words are, the more frequent they are. So for example, we can see that prices, especially electricity prices for both of the country presented here are common.
Sorry.
No problem. It was the previous one. Okay. We can see supply is something specific to Nigeria that you can see on the right with words like constant electricity, electricity distribution, power supply, without electricity. And actually, we also had this information by Simon's presentation you saw before. And finally, we can see that renewable energy is as present on one side as on the other. Here we can see that gas prices are specific to USA, which is on the right, but that cheap prices and renewable energy is a common topic for both countries. And you must know that we have chosen those 4 countries because English is the main language, so we can add we had an easy common basis for comparing text, and they are also in different parts of the globe, so we can compare them because they have different developments and history. Moreover, we wanted to understand more the relationships that existed between words, and to do this, we visualize the top 25 co-occurring words for each country. So here we have some graph with a note per word and edges linking words that are related, and this method is handy for viewing what's going on in the text. We can see that the word energy is linked to the word sources, but also renewable, capacity, or sector. And if you want to do a comparison, we can see that fossil fuel has more edges for US than it has for India, and that the billing issues are more related to electricity in India, while they are more related to gas in USA. Finally, here we see that Nigeria is completely focused on supply and electricity, and otherwise we see that both countries mention China. So now I'm going to tell you about a specific type of models that we've used knowing these preliminary insights from EDA on tweets, especially about transfer learning, which is a method that permitted breakthrough of natural language processing fields. So we defined it earlier And therefore, you understood that it's completely in the scope of the project, which Amarjip presented you the challenges. So it seems natural to us to try state-of-the-art models in the field covering our project. So how does transfer learning work? The idea is that we have a model that has been trained on text. Often text is not labeled, but this allows the model to acquire some knowledge of the language. For example, the way sentences are constructed, as well as vocabulary basics. And then we are able to reuse this knowledge when we are going to refine the model on the task that interests us by using our specific data. And in general, the volume of our data is less important, and that was the case in this project. And so now we will see how we, so Omdena collaborators, applied it on content related to energy transition. So here we have two NLP tasks to tackle, a text classification task and graph analytics. The two were entering into sentiment analysis as I defined it earlier. So the text classification was fine-grained, therefore it was very precise in terms of polarity. And the second was aspect-based, that is to say, it was focused on sentiments associated with aspect terms linked to categories. So let's start with the text classification. We had two models that we adapt to our problem. One was fairly general on the issue of the energy transition, and one was focused on complaints about costs. So the general model was a pre-trained BERT model we saw previously, the English Wikipedia content and a dataset called book corpus, and we adapted it to a dataset of 100K script tweets labeled by collaborators with the help of dictionaries, but also hashtags, in a sense that we can reasonably think that a tweet is not positive about energy transition when it says it's in favor of climate hoax or things like that. And on the contrary, if the tweet is talking about things like save the planet, we can reasonably think that it's favorable. And as I said, we use the emotion dictionary for labeling. So here are some results. With positive and negative labels, we were able to make some comparison on whether or not tweets were in favor of the energy transition. So you can see that 55% of US-based tweets were against energy transition, while only 34% of non-US-based tweets had the same opinion. So now we will talk about the specific model focused on cost. So it used the same pre-trained model, but it was refined on a specific dataset from Kaggle, which is a data science platform. And it's called Climate 44 because it has 44K tweets with the opportunity to work more finely because it has a sentiment index as label, which was between 0 and 1. And the more it was close to 1, the more the tweet was supposed to be positive. And there is a threshold below we consider a tweet can no longer be positive. And so we applied this fine-tuned model on 43K tweets actually that we knew talked about complaints around renewable energy because it followed a filtering operation and it covered 22 countries. We also applied clustering, K-means clustering algorithm actually, to find out what type of subjects the complaints were divided into. And as you can see on the left, Brazil has no complaints that are related to finance, for example. However, many complaints on technology, competition, or reliability. And for example, Nigeria still only complain about policy. And so finally, we made a different type of sentiment analysis that was aspect-based and which mobilized some things called community detection. So basically, community detection is a method for finding groups within complex systems. And as it's written, it's represented on a graph. So let's go for this part of on-graph analytics. So we try to answer this following question: how renewable energy and its related topics flows around USA and UK. And it involved two steps. The first step needed tweets. We had tweets that needed to be mapped with location provided by OpenStreetMap data, so same provider as Simon's project. And then topics were identified by applying an LDA model that Amardeep defined previously. And using this topic, we were able to filter on renewable energy topics only. And then we were able to apply a sentiment classifier, which is also BERT sentiment classifiers. And in cases where labels were not assigned, which can occur, a CAN propagation label was used. Label propagation is a semi-supervised method that can be used when only part of data is annotated. And in the concept is pretty close to clustering in a sense that indeed nodes adopt labels based on their neighbors, and the postulate being that similar pieces of text have same label. So this is what it gives in application. It was only applied in North America and part of Europe, especially UK, but it's scalable. We focused on two subjects, climate change topic and renewable energies. So here we see, for example, the concentration of climate change topic in the city of Miami. Here you have the view of the USA, and in terms of color, red means strong topic concentration, and yellow means a mild topic concentration, and green a low topic concentration. And you can see also the same thing for Europe. So we see rather average concentration around this topic. And for renewable energy, we can see that we have more concentration. Yeah. And an interesting thing we noted and that we can see here is there is a high concentration can be linked to an extreme feeling, positive or negative. And we can see it in particular when confronting topic with sentiments, but we have some cities which are quite surprising. For example, North, the one in red on the right, we see on the left at Northport that there is not a strong topic traversal, but there's still a strong sentiment on the topic, even if it's not really concentrated. So there are some kind of layers. But especially what we see is that when a target city has a feeling, for example, Miami, the cities around tend to have the same. And we can see that also in Europe, for example, with London, every cities nearby have the same color. And so what we've learned from the data exploration to the output of this type of model is that there is a topic variation by geographical area and country. For example, we saw that electricity availability isn't discussed everywhere. We see that it was a main topic in Nigeria, while in US it wasn't a topic at all. We also saw in the data collection and exploratory part that discussion forums and articles can talk about the same concerns, especially around power supply and constant providing of electricity. We also saw, as we just mentioned, that sentiments are flowing on nearby cities, and that some countries have an overall feeling more positive than others. We saw it with the quite US-centric analysis of tweets. And obviously we can make some improvements. So to begin, we can apply the graph approach to other areas, and we can also see how fine-tuned models perform on any comments, because for now we only applied it to tweets that they haven't seen before, but we could, for example, have applied it to YouTube comments or Reddit comments or any of the data we were able to collect.
And so to summarize, the current AI models that we have for detecting, classifying, and perhaps predicting the content from the sort of discussions people have online when it comes to topics like green energy, energy transition, and so on, we've been able to compare most of the methods that we've built, and this is again just a small summarization of the accuracies and the, you could say, pitfalls that some of the methods have. We initially started with more typical random forest classifiers and logistic regressions, moved on to multinomial naive Bayes methods, which didn't exactly fit. And we had to stick to more ensemble methods like linear SVC, which gave us perhaps great accuracies. And so to close, we see at present that we have a lot of good repositories for social sentiments, and this comes from different countries, websites, and languages. Sentiment analysis results for sources other than English, we have those done in other languages, and we've been able to apply some level of sentiment analyses to understand how people interact with the issues in their country when it comes to these topics. The current generated models for topic synthesis and predictions were again well adjusted to dissect information from most of the social media websites we've targeted, and the code is again, open for use by others. And ensemble methods like linear SVC, as we mentioned, are much better when it comes to connecting sentiments to context. To close, social media is a really rich resource when it comes to tapping information and understanding what people are talking about. And of course, social perceptions of topics like energy bills and energy use, so on, they vary depending on online anonymity and on the culture of the platform where people have these discussions. What we've seen from our studies, of course, is that some websites tend to be a little bit better when it comes to doing these sort of analyses. Whether in Facebook, of course, take the cake when it comes to this sort of, richness when it comes to data. And, the improvements for sentiment analysis need to go beyond text, because there seems to be a much greater emphasis on non-textual communication, which is something that needs to be, addressed as we, move into these sort of analytical concepts in the future. And with that, I hope you've been able to carry out some amazing insights from this presentation. Thank you so much, and we will be looking forward to any questions or doubts.
Thank you so much, Amardeep and Julia. That was excellent. We've obviously gone a bit long. It's 5 minutes to the hour, so we'll get started on our Q&A. If you're able to, please stick around. We'll probably go till 10 minutes after the hour. I just want to just share now that we do have another project kicking off in this area of energy transition, where we'll be doing rooftop detection and using to accelerate solar power adoption. And you can find information about that on our website, as well as our next demo day, which will be in a few weeks. I'll have more information up on the screen, but I'll do that after the demo day. So right now I want to, after the Q&A, I want to turn this over to my colleague, Hosanna de Oliveira Gomez. I'm sorry, I didn't say that quite right, who will be overseeing our Q&A. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. And the name was perfect, Laura, so no worries. Thank you all for your questions and for sticking with us. This is a very interesting discussion. So I'll just start already with the first question. It's to Simon. regarding data sources. This was a question from Ahmed from the ODCO team. And he says, amazing work, Simon. Would love to know if the satellite images and data about population and electricity access using night images are free and may be available for other countries. We are trying to replicate this study to Namibia. So if you would like to
yes.
that.
I mean, all the data we used was free. The satellite images, all the satellites, each satellite uses their own API. But there's a common API which has been produced by Google Earth Engine, which you can download all satellite images from pretty much all the satellites, and including the nighttime lights satellite, which covers the whole world. It's geosynchronous, which means that it goes at the same time of day everywhere in the world somehow. Which takes a bit of getting your head around, but yeah, but that's available, and I can't remember the frequency. I think they've certainly got monthly. I think they've got daily downloads, but there's it's a lot of data. The population data, the best website for population data is WorldPop, and that's probably the place to go to understand a bit more about population data. And they have population models for a lot of countries. But in the end, we didn't use theirs because it actually didn't work very well for Nigeria. But your mileage may vary. So, but all free. We didn't pay for any data in this project.
So thanks, Simon. I'll just continue in this data questions. So also to you, Megan Lilly was also asking whether the data collection and the people that were looking at the maps, how did this work in the team? Who was doing this and how this was organized?
Yes, it was a team. We had, I don't know, somewhere between 20, 30 people working on the project, and a number of different work streams. So I've only talked really about one part of the project. Other people were working on other areas, such as location of water bore, places where you could have water boreholes, on the efficiency of on the solar irradiance, so that you can see how efficient the solar panels are in different areas, and a wide range of other bits of data. On these bits specifically, there were a number of people also on that work stream looking at different data sources and putting together different models.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Yeah, this is always a lot of work we have very large teams, and Omdena. This is also how we get things going. So next question is going to be for either Amardeep or Julia. It's a question about the challenges for data collection. So this is a question from Aaron Tevapalan. I'm sorry if I mispronounced. And the question is, what was the process or the challenges that you guys face when retrieving information from Facebook? So I don't know if Julia or Amardeep who wants to answer that.
I think I can take that up. I was primarily involved in most of the data collection for Facebook posts, and the biggest challenge that comes with this is, of course, that there seems to be a little bit of a filter that most discussion groups put in as to how much content they want to share. And finding reasonable number of discussion boards where you can do this sort of collection is equally, difficult, because while there happen to be a lot of discussions that people have, it's just difficult to find private groups. And even if you were to use an API to do most of this data collection, there's not a lot of different, you could say, rows or features that you could generate from it. However, the reason why this was made a little bit simpler was because we were able to find more public focus groups where people have such discussions. And we, instead of focusing centrally on discussion boards and Facebook groups on, you could say, specific countries, we decided to go with more global Facebook discussion boards, and that proved to be, it proved to be a great advantage data collection procedure. I hope that answered your question. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. It's also in this direction that there was a lot of interest regarding the collection for this project, the data collection for this project. So I'll just go to the question from Suzanne Moran, which is a question about the scope of the project from you, Amardeep and Julia, about the sentiment analysis. And she says, the sentiment analysis is a really interesting tool, but often people's publicly voices opinions are not aligned with their real opinions or with their actual behavior. So the question is, how do you mitigate this kind of anomaly, or is it even possible?
I would say it's, Julia, do you want to go with that, or? I'm sorry, okay, sorry, okay, yeah. So what I was going to mention is that most of the models that we looked into, the more context-based ones, they allow us to connect the kind of phrases and keywords that people are using in their conversations online. And while it is true that there is a certain threshold for erroneous information being posted out because people tend to have varying opinions, we are able to connect the sort of, context that people put out when they have these conversations. So we do understand that there is a certain bit of tolerance we need to put into when we do these data collection procedures, but we go, with these models time and time again, and we apply these models on different sources, and we come up with good results, which indicates that, despite these differences, it's still possible to connect what people are thinking with what they're posting online. Of course, as technology marches on, there's better sentiment-driven models that are being produced. The most common being an ADA boosting, sort of model that I've become a little bit more familiar with. But yes, I do feel that, such anomalies can be mitigated. It's a simple question of using the right models for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you guys for the question and for the answer as well. I'll just go to the next question. There's a question to Simon, and this is from Joseph Itofop. And he says, great work by the AI engineers and great presentation by Simon. So to you, Simon, when you say that most part of Lagos have access to electricity, what do you mean? Could you explain further? Because the most places that are connected to the grid doesn't necessarily mean that they have access to electricity supply.
Yeah, this is a good question. I think I mentioned that do they have electricity or do they not have electricity is quite an ambiguous question, because many people have it maybe for a few hours a day. So the data that it's based on is on the satellite images. So based on the satellite images, we can see that most of the Lagos area is lit up at night. So they do have, that there is electricity for most of the Lagos area. That doesn't mean everybody in Lagos has electricity. It doesn't mean they have it necessarily in their homes, but it means that there is electricity in most of the metropolitan Lagos area. And even if the places that don't are relatively close to the grid. So part of the criteria here was that we were trying to stay away from places that are near the grid. And actually, interestingly, in Nigeria and probably other countries, there's a lot of people that live under the grid, so very, very close to a power line, maybe right under the power line, but they don't have electricity. So you could argue that those are also target sites for off-grid solar panels, but also you could say, well, if you were going to supply those houses, probably the better way would be to attach them to the grid. So that's why we put the grid on the map and said, well, the ones on our target list are ones that are more than 15 kilometers from the grid, which would probably rule out most of Lagos anyway. But we can see from the satellite images of Lagos that it's pretty much, it's lit up. The whole of the area is lit up with lights, implying that there is electricity of some sort in that area.
Okay. Thanks, Simon, for clarifying. So we're going to go to, unfortunately, our last question because of the time constraints. This is a question again to Amardeep and Julia. And this is a question from Sudha Subramani. It's also about the data collection. And the question goes as, thanks for the amazing presentation. One, is there any data collection limitations with Twitter? Two, it was mentioned Reddit and Facebook are preferred sources of sentiment analysis, and why not Twitter? And three, I think this was already maybe a little bit to answer, but in any way, three, how many posts were considered for sentiment analysis and how many posts were manually annotated? I don't know if Julia wants to go.
So for the first question, yeah, there are limitations. First, you have to apply if you want to use the official Twitter API, and also the amount of tweets collected is limited, and it's only recent tweets. But there are ways to, do some analysis of evolution of topic over time, etc., by using some open sources libraries like getAllTweets, for example. getAllTweets was used in this project, in particular for the model focus on. And for the second, I can turn to the third. How many posts were considered for sentimental analysis? For the manual annotations, 20,000 were manually annotated. The remaining labeled dataset were publicly available dataset. One I mentioned from Kaggle, which is Climate 44, and another which is Sentiment 140. And yeah, so Climate 44 had Sentiment Polarity Index and Sentiment. The other one had 3 labels, positive, neutral, and negative. And I will ask Amardi.
Yeah, to go with the second question, Reddit and Facebook are more preferable for the sort of data collection, because when we go through the whole cleanup process for getting the data which we need for performing our analyses on, at least what I've seen is that there tends to be a far heavier use of non-textual characters when it comes to conversations on Twitter, which means that there's a lot of there's a lot of difficulty that comes into connecting the context behind why people have tweeted this. Maybe it's just the culture of the platforms, or perhaps the way people use these websites, but there's less use of emojis or other kinds of characters that makes it difficult to do analysis. So Reddit and Facebook tend to be a little bit better for this, I'd say. As for the number of posts, on the top of my head, I'd say we must have cost at least like 30 or 40,000 at least, because we were, commenting at least different subreddits and different kinds of, discussion boards on Facebook. So, yeah.
So I'll thank you all for your questions, and also the panelists for the replies. And feel free, unfortunately, we didn't have enough time to cover all the questions, but feel free to connect with them on LinkedIn or through our platform, and then I'll hand over back to Laura.
Okay, wonderful. Let me just get back to this. Okay, thank you so much to everyone for answering all those questions. Well done. And I also want to share that in a couple of weeks, I mentioned this quickly earlier on, we'll be kicking off a new machine learning project focused on roof detection with solar energy adoption with our partners NG Factory and Solar AI. You can find more information about that on our website. The URL is up on the screen right now. And we've pulled together a team of more than 50 experts from around the world for that intensive 8-week effort. And then finally, thank you again to our presenters and all the work they did to represent these projects. And also a huge thank you to the members of the teams, these projects teams. Both of these teams did such superb work, and they included dozens of experienced AI and machine learning engineers. And I mentioned in the chat, it's worth noting that each of those teams included collaborators from more than 14 countries, and typically our teams are at least 33% women. So we try to avoid bias from the start by having these extremely diverse collaborative teams, and when we pull people together, it's quite magical. Thank you everyone who's joined us today and for sticking through to the end here. We will be following up with you in the next few days, and we'll be posting this video on our website. Of course, feel free to reach out to me via email if you want to learn more. And then finally, we are having our next demo day on July 22nd. We'll talk about Omdena's innovative approaches to overcoming data challenges in AI projects, and we really hope you can join us. We have already had 3 demo days, and information about those demo days is up on our website, where you can find overviews of what we discussed and also the videos from those presentations. So once again, thank you to all my colleagues, and we hope to see you at the next event. Take care.